Okay. Okay, so I'm actually really excited. This information came to me several years ago, and I understood it, I think, from a mental perspective, and now I kind of get it from like an integrative perspective. So we did the moon a few weeks back, which is kind of like the low level consciousness. And the ascendant is really the point of consciousness in which the I, in which consciousness enters our life. So in a minute, I'm going to kind of show you just my chart, just so you can kind of see the things that we're going to focus on. But we're not focused on the ascendant in isolation. We're focused on the ascendant as the center of consciousness of the chart. The second house cusp, how we materialize that. And we're going to be using what's called an equal house system. So for those of you who are just starting astrology, you may not know that there's different house systems. There's the Placidus, there's the Koch, and there's the equal house. For this particular class, we're going to be using equal house systems. There's been a move towards equal house systems lately because of a lot of archetypal astrology, astrological psychology, transpersonal psychology and astrology. And you guys know I dive into that pretty deeply. So for this particular class and anything that we do in terms of ancestral astrology, we'll always use the equal house system. So the 12th house cusp is going to identify today the matrix in which you were born. It's going to be in alignment with the 4th and the 8th. And this is going to be by element. So I'll explain it in a minute. But just so you know that when you do the equal house system, it's going to be that the 4th, 8th, and 12th houses that are the subconscious houses are going to be the same element. And that's what we're going to look at. And then the way we materialize it is using the second house cusp. So for each sign tonight, we're going to not only look at the ascendant, we're going to look at the 4th, 8th, 12th, and the second. And we're also going to look at the descendant, which is the 7th, and the midheaven, which is the 10th. So each sign is going to have a lot of information. So here's my chart. And just to kind of give you, this is not an equal house picture, but just so you understand, here's the ascendant, the cusp of the first. The cusp here is very faint line, is the cusp of the second. The cusp here at the 4th is in Pisces. The cusp of the 8th is in Cancer, and the cusp of the 12th is in Scorpio, so all water. And that's going to be your matrix, which is going to determine why you have such difficulty integrating the point of consciousness of the ascendant. So in mundane astrology, and when I teach astrology, I always teach the sort of mundane, down-to-earth stuff because that's what clients want, and people call and ask, you know, am I going to meet the guy? Am I going to win the lottery? And all that great stuff. But if you know me and I've read your chart, you know that I work from more of an esoteric or a world view using the chart like quantum astrology, where everything's interrelated. And that's really what tonight's about. It's the idea that the chart absolutely contains every single thing in the universe. So you can see everybody in your chart, family members, yourself, cycles that are coming, your children, your friends, you can see absolutely everything. It is the all is one, the all is mind mentality of Hermetic philosophy. And so it's also in alignment with cyclical law because everything in the universe is cyclical. And that's why the chart is cyclical. So we're using transpersonal astrology, and consciousness is what makes transpersonal psychology or esoteric astrology separate from mundane astrology, is that we're looking to raise consciousness, understand our consciousness level, and how we can evolve spiritually. So in esoteric or quantum astrology, the ascendant is the point where the consciousness enters the chart. This is not a sign that you willingly integrate. You tiptoe around it. You'll be forced to have situations in your life that kind of make it part of you, but it always feels forced. It always feels as if it's something that's separate from you. So the difference from mundane astrology is that the ascendant is your mask. It has to do with your body. It has to do with your personality, and that's all true. But again, that's a very separate or egocentric point of view rather than a transpersonal or quantum point of view where everything is unified. The ascendant is a predestined matrix similar to the moon. The moon was a predestined matrix from the womb, and it's sort of the viewpoint in which you view all situations that we have to grow from. And the ascendant is a predestined matrix that we refuse to enter as a sign, and we don't want to view the world in this sign, but we should. I don't like that word, but we should. We live this sign as destiny almost forced on us. All energies are trapped within the body. We are the microcosm of the macrocosm. Our body contains everything in the universe. And because it is linked to the first house, that has a lot to do with our body, our personality, and the mask that we wear, we feel that we're sort of trapped by this sign and not free to really be expressed, but it's actually the sign that we have to integrate and learn how to express from. Subconsciously, we reject this energy. The subconscious houses, and we're going to look at those tonight, are the 4, the 8, and the 12. And so this one actually comes to deconstruct the structure of the 4, 8, and the 12 houses, and specifically the element. The 4, 8, 12 has a specific element that we try to deconstruct with the element and the sign of the ascendant. As we grow in consciousness, we embrace the energy and recognize it as part of ourselves. And that's just consciousness as a whole when we start realizing that we're all of these things. The biggest connection to the universe is through the sign of the ascendant. It is the clearest path to have a totality of a spiritual experience. So when I do readings, I always find the myth of the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. And we've talked about the sun and the moon before in terms of our journey of leaving home and returning home. But it's through the point of the ascendant that we can actually do it differently, that we can actually raise our consciousness that little bit from what we inherited at the moment of conception. Once you accept the situations that the sign of the ascendant produces, then you vibrate at that sign and at that level, and you can raise your consciousness. So this is, and I always say, you can't see the level of consciousness on the chart. That is the only thing that the chart doesn't show. And today I'm going to show you the 4 levels of consciousness per sign. So I can't tell a client, you're at, Piranha, and you need to get to Fisherman in terms of the Pisces. But I can see that the point of entry is the ascendant if it's Pisces, for instance, and then they can grow from there, and we can see it by decanat where they need to grow. The level of consciousness is still free will. Most people suffer with the sign of the ascendant. However, once we master the destiny of the ascendant, then we grow in consciousness. One of the ways that we suffer is through illness. I was talking to my mom yesterday. My mom's become a little obsessed with like drinking ocean water and all of the studies that are coming out about ocean water and alleviating all of these illnesses. And this is true of a lot of things that come to our availability of knowledge when we're on Earth, is that just like Ayurveda, I'm a proponent of Ayurveda or Chinese medicine. There is a lot of things that are natural medicine that are at the hands of people that we sort of just, knock off and we move, into other things. And it's because illness serves a purpose. In the earthly realm, the body is where consciousness enters. And oftentimes it's not until we get an illness or we get sort of touched through the physical sign of the ascendant, the body, that we don't indeed react. So we oftentimes suffer with this sign. And each sign has a certain body part assigned to it. And with that, a subconscious programming that we could sort of oversee or surpass the illness to get to the main message, but oftentimes we're not that evolved. So it's not until we get sort of hurt, quote unquote, or have illness through the body that we actually start making a change. I'm also a big believer that we have to go through a pretty severe grief cycle, illness, existential crisis before we actually decide, make the subconscious decision to transmute. And oftentimes it's through the sign of the ascendant that we're able to get to that next level of consciousness. So it does make us suffer often because we're living unconsciously in low vibration, but it's also necessary because it is the vehicle of spirit. The body's the vessel. So it's oftentimes the only language, so to speak, that the universe has to get our attention. So I said before, we're going to be using the equal houses for this type of chart reading. If you have Astro Gold or a Solar Fire, you can set it to equal houses, or for this particular evening, like I said, as long as you see the matrix element in the 12th, you know what the other ones are. So if you don't want to rearrange your settings, that's fine. You'll know by the elemental matrix what you're referring to. So Phoebe Weiss wrote a book named Inside the Cosmic Mind, and she's also a proponent. She actually went back and forth, like myself, to whether or not using the Placidus or the equal houses. And she says also when she does her astrological archetype work that she uses equal houses. I use it with ancestral or transgenerational work or archetypal work. Richard Tarnas, Kieran LeGrice, pioneers in archetypal cosmology, written several books on the topic, also encourage the equal houses specifically for this kind of work. So we're also going to look, besides at the sign of the ascendant, the 4, 8, and 12 houses. This is the psychological tension or the subconscious tension in our life. And it's these 3 houses in this particular element, the elemental matrix, that blocks the subconscious so that we cannot raise our consciousness because they keep us comfortable. And we'll go through each one. The 4th house cusp shows the sign in which we find refuge. The 4th house is related to the childhood home. So we're given in the 1st house cusp our body, 2nd house cusp our values, 3rd house cusp our education and brothers and sisters, and the 4th house cusp our family home. We will recreate that home everywhere. That is like the moon. The sign of the cusp is how we want to feel comfortable. So even if it's Aquarius and unstable, that's our view of stability or refuge. If it's in Capricorn and it's cold and lonely, that's what we create to create refuge. So that's going to be one of the first things we have to sort of deconstruct and shatter in order to raise consciousness. We don't want to see anything else other than this sign. This is our comfort zone. And it's going to be, because we're doing equal houses, it's going to be maybe for some of you shift to another element, but we'll see per sign what it is. The 4th house is how we escape. We feel safe in this sign, and it reminds us of our childhood home. Again, safety is relative. Emotions are relative. This is a perception that you have of what safety feels like. So even if it's cold and dark and lonely or unstable or violent, if it's Aries, that is what you want in your subconscious in order to feel like you're home. It's very linked to your moon sign. The 8th house cusp shows us the themes that we have to dive into very deeply. These are the secrets hidden in our subconscious. So when your parents were conceiving you, whether they knew it or not, and I don't know who I was talking to, maybe it was Maria the other day, I don't know. I said, oh, did so-and-so want a boy? There was something in the person's chart that was Mars. The 8th house holds the secrets that were your parents' subconscious. So for instance, if they wanted a boy and you were a girl, or if they wanted an intellectual and you weren't, and you were a girl, for instance, and they only thought you were going to be about ribbons, you know, and rainbows, the 8th house holds that information from the moment of subconscious. And these are the secrets that we keep. They're not like the 12th house secrets. The 12th house secrets are those that we ourselves aren't even accessible to. We don't even know about these aspects of our psyche. The 8th we do, but we keep secret. It's kind of like put that away. We don't accept this in our family type of stuff. And we need to shine light on these areas in our life. The 8th house is where you remain attached. This is what needs to die in ourselves, what we need to let go of. Excuse me. This is our Hydra, and we're going to talk about the Hydra in a minute. So I think most of you know about my skinny cow theory with Saturn, and every 7 years we have these small deaths. And the 8th house is linked to what needs to die in us repeatedly over and over and over again. I'm just talking about the cusp. If you happen to have planets in there, then that's an extra layer. But we're just tonight talking about the cusps of these houses, and then you can add on the meaning of the planets if you have anything in there. But this is something that repeatedly we have to let go of, detach, and it's unfortunately the house of resources. So it's a house of resources and other people's resources, oftentimes what we attach to because it's what someone gives us, and it's what gives us our value, or we think gives us our value, when indeed it's false. The 12th house cusp refers to situations or past lives that need to feel are completed. If we focus on the completion of these in this lifetime, then we remain in a state of inertia and repeat things from the past. The 12th house cusp is done, it's past, it's over. However, the 12th house cusp you're going to see when we start going through the signs is exactly the matrix that needs to fall apart, that needs to be deconstructed to allow for the sign and element of the ascendant. But we're so attached to that matrix, we're so attached to that past life structure subconsciously that that's why we have to let it go. And there's oftentimes planets in there that people are not even aware of. So we constantly go back to those things in the past, and they keep us stuck. The 4, 8, 12 house energies go against the growth of the ascendant. We must deconstruct all 3 of these houses at the subconscious level, at the energetic level, meaning the element, and then we can grow into our ascendant. If we hold on to that matrix, we will not be able to integrate fully the level of consciousness and the growth of the ascendant. Throughout life, you're going to have situations, people, environments that represent and live out messages of the ascendant. You're going to see these people as separate from this idea that they are them and you are you. Remember, this is the 1-7 axis, and we will talk briefly about the descendant, which is the sign on the 7th cusp. So it's an us versus them mentality in the psyche, and we see ourselves as separate from. And one of the things that we do in transpersonal or esoteric astrology is identify that we are one, we are all one. So therefore, if we continue to think that these people, these situations, this sign, the things reflected from these people are separate, then we don't integrate the ascendant. So here I have the levels of consciousness, and I can email you. I'm going to send you the PowerPoint, but if you want, I can email you this sheet separately. So my astrology teacher, and there are 4 levels of consciousness in the Vedas as well, but I like to just use his because physically it makes sense to me. The rock is the lowest level of consciousness, water is 2nd, wine is 3rd, and blood is the highest level of consciousness. In the Vedas, it talks about waking, sleep, deep sleep, and then turiya, which is sort of pure consciousness, if you like that language, but it's the same. And here is the sign and the 4 levels of consciousness. You get to decide in which level of consciousness you're going to live out anything, but specifically for this class, your ascendant. So here I am, my Sagittarius, I have donkey, horse, centaur, and then Pegasus. So I'll send this to you separately so that you have it. And these are the 4 levels of consciousness. You're also going to look at your decanat of your ascendant, and that's also going to tell you some information, and we'll talk about that briefly. The midheaven, or the 10th house cusp, shows the characteristics of people that force us to live out our ascendant. So you think of the 1-7 as the 0 to 100, the 10 is the 48 to 52. So those people that appear to be, you know, separate from us, or rulers or bosses, since the 10th house has a lot to do with profession or our public persona or places, people of authority, they'll seem to be as if they're pushing us, you know, in places of discomfort, which is exactly what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to push us to those places so that we can assume our ascendant. And then at another level, it's also the cusp of the mother. Some would say the father. In some philosophies, the 10th is the father because he's outside of the home, whereas the mother is the 4 inside of the home. I actually see it opposite. And a lot of more modern day astrologers have just decided that the 4-10 cusp is both just the parents. So you might identify with the sign on your midheaven as one of your parents by sign or by decanat, and that can tell you personally. But I personally see the 10th as mother and the 4th as father. And then that can also indicate that that parent is one of those parents that make you uncomfortable and nudge you to sort of integrate the ascendant. So if you have a fire ascendant sign like me, your structure comes from water. That means your 4, 8, 12 are going to be water. This is what you want to disintegrate so that you can integrate your fire sign. If you have a water ascendant, your structure, your matrix comes from air. If you have an earth ascendant, then your matrix or structure comes from fire. And if you have an air sign ascendant, then your structure comes from earth. So what happens? Fire people, that is supposed to be energy that's externalized, that's leadership, that's go-getter, are stuck in the emotion. So for them, it's all about the emotion, and they don't want to forge a path. They don't want to be the trailblazer that they're intended to be. They're staying in this sort of emotional construct. And that is what that infrastructure is what needs to sort of shatter. For water signs, they need to take on more of an emotional infrastructure or family infrastructure, but they're sort of dissociated because they come from an air matrix. So they don't want to settle down. They don't want to build a home and a family because they want to have scattered energy. They want to be dissociated and have options and be scattered all over the place. For earth signs, they come from fire. Fire being transcendent, fire being, you know, rising energy, this masculine force, it's the energy of transmutation. And they're obligated to be limited in an earth structure. I find this one to be very, very difficult for the clients I read from. The psyche just is unable to understand this limited, you know, structure of the vessel of the body. I don't know how many of you have seen the movie Aladdin, but when the genie comes out of Aladdin, he's like, phenomenal cosmic powers, itty bitty living space. That's how I see that. It's like I'm this phenomenal cosmic power, this fire, and I'm structured into this earth ascendant, this earth vessel. That goes for all of us because we're all spirit confined to the matter, but I find in practice this one to be the most difficult for people. And then air signs come from a structure of earth. And earth is structure and limits and boundaries, and they're being required to destroy all of that and say no structure, no boundary, no time on the clock, no saving of money, whatever that is at their level, and kind of fly by the seat of their pants. So you could see how it just doesn't jive with the structure and the matrix upon which you're built. You're supposed to just
Francis?
Yes.
Sorry, Adriana's trying to join, but it says that the password is incorrect. Sorry for interrupting, but she's really eager.
There's no password. Hold on. Okay. So you can see that it seems really easy, but we're basically deconstructing everything we're built on emotionally, psychologically, and materially in order to integrate this sign. So when I understood that, it was like, well, it makes so much sense why I've rejected this sign. Now I've tiptoed around my Sag. I work at a university. I'm obviously, a teacher and some elements of the sign, and you'll find that perhaps you're integrating it in some aspects, but it's really tiptoeing compared to the level of consciousness that you should be integrating this at. And it really requires breaking down the structure in which you're built, both emotionally, mentally, and in some cases physically. The way to materialize the ascendant is found in the second house. So if you're breaking down the infrastructure of who you are subconsciously, psychologically, and emotionally, you have to rebuild yourself on something, not just the sign of the body or this consciousness. The way to do that is the second house cusp, and that's your value system. So we will see that per sign as well. As I said before, the people that help live out our ascendant are found in the 10th house cusp, which is the midheaven, as well as the 7th. The 7th is the opposite sign. So again, it's this idea of us versus them, you versus me. And when you learn to understand that the 7th house cusp, that descendant is indeed you, and you're creating those situations, then it's easier. And it's not an accident that that's the sign that you build relationships on, the 7th house cusp, because you're copying your parents' exact relationship, whether it's marriage or a fling or whatever it was. And I've said this before, that in order to integrate that, you shift by one decanat. So we can also look at the decanat of the ascendant, as well as raising the consciousness with the decanat of the descendant, and then you see that it's parallel. So we're going to be looking at two universal laws. First is the principle of mentalism. So this is the hardest one for most people to understand in the Kabbalion. Most people sort of just get to law of gender in addition to others. But the law or the principle of mentalism says that all is mind. It is very difficult for people to understand the intensity and complexity of the universe, and that we've created absolutely everything in our life related to our thoughts. Like, this just really eludes people at the level of the magnitude. But this is basically what quantum physics is about. This is basically what Sankhya philosophy is about. This is what Hermetic philosophy is about. And big part of this work of raising consciousness is owning that what you're living, you've created. So in quantum physics, mentalism means the physical world can be reduced to patterns and potential connections among potential concentrations of matter or energy that might or might not come into form. So I get people all the time, is this happening? Is that happening? And I can read energy patterns and say yes, or I can see it on the chart. But we hold back things that are in sort of our destiny or in our energy field to enter our space. If we don't let go of childhood patterns or emotional infrastructure that no longer serves us, how are we going to be sort of treated as an adult by the universe? So it's an exchange. It's like, I'll do this and then I'll get this to replace this old behavior, this whole thought pattern. So we ourselves are the only ones that are holding ourselves back. The next is the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in, everything has its tides, all things rise and fall, the pendulum swing manifests in everything, the measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left, and rhythm compensates. And so we're going to have swings, these 0 to 100, the ascendant and the descendant are a perfect place. But what happens to be, quote unquote, happens to be the 48 to 52, or something that's going to help us reduce the swing, is the sign on the midheaven. So the 7th house helps with the 0 to the 100, because most people only want to be on one part of the story. So it's like, I want to hold on to my good qualities, my good buckets, but I don't want to look at the bad buckets. So the 7th house cusp would give us sort of the other side of the mask. And then the 10th will help us to reduce those swings. That this is all with consciousness. We have to offer, when this help is offered by the universe, we have to take it. We can't look at it as just problematic or conflictive and someone else doing something to us. He who grasps the truth of the mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path to mastery. This is basically, we've got to take personal responsibility that we're creating everything. Everything is mental. It's from a moment of thought, the moment of conception, or the universe is based on thoughts that we put out into the universe, and we create our world based on that. And the chart looked that way. The quantum astrology chart, or the transpersonal chart, is reflecting what we're creating. So I want to share a couple of myths. First is Hercules' labor, the capture of the doe. This myth is directly related to the sign of Cancer. The sign of Cancer is what we call the mass consciousness sign, and its opposite sign is Capricorn, which is called the spiritual aspirant sign. If we stay in the mass consciousness of the beehive or the honeypot, we don't ever expand in consciousness. It's the big door that Jesus talks about in the Sermon on the Mount instead of the small door, which is what most people don't want to go through. So in this particular labor, he is sent to capture this doe. Artemis wants the doe, Apollo wants the doe, and they're fighting for the doe. And so Hercules gets the doe. And what he has to do is that he has to carry it and has it touch his heart. And he has to bring it to the temple. And the reason that he is taking it from both Artemis and Apollo is that Artemis, like when we did the moon class, is the instinct or the emotion. Apollo is the sun, a little bit better, but is still just intellect. It is Hercules, or the ascendant, that really is our spiritual growth, our level of consciousness, and our intuition. Now, intuition does not equal spirituality, and I'm very adamant about that. It is only one step on the path to raising consciousness when you quiet enough to listen to your guidance, listen to that higher self, and start listening to the guidance that you get, and of course, internalizing it as a message for yourself, not for someone else. But these three levels are what we want to kind of get away from at the instinct intellect level. And we really want to try to heighten the consciousness through intuition. And that's only when he brings the doe to the temple, holding it to his heart. If we stay at the mental arena, it's just knowledge. When we bring it to the heart and apply it, it is consciousness, it's a rising consciousness, it's intuition, and it is now understanding and wisdom. In the Kabbalah, there's 10 Sephiro on the tree of life. The top triangle that gets you to Ketcher, to the crown, which is universe, is the triangle of understanding, wisdom, and knowledge. So knowledge is just one piece of it. If you don't apply it through understanding and wisdom, you haven't gotten anywhere. That's why we tiptoe around the ascendant. Until we really integrate it with our heart and have wisdom around it, we don't really increase consciousness. The second myth is the myth of Metis, Zeus, Athena, and Hephaestus, which similarly says something. Metis is a Titan. She's pregnant with Athena. Zeus is told that one of his children, is going to dethrone him, and in good fashion, he swallows Metis. But she's already pregnant. And Zeus births Athena through his head. So this again is, let's raise the consciousness from the emotion of, oh my God, I'm going to get dethroned, to the intellect, Athena being the goddess of wisdom. Through her head, through Zeus's head, she's birthed. But it's only with the help of Hephaestus that Athena can be born. And he takes his sledgehammer and he cracks open Zeus's helmet, and Athena is born. And Hephaestus is curiosity and imagination and spiritual realms in higher consciousness. So this is repeated, that we have to sort of overcome the instinct of the Titan Metis, the emotion of Zeus swallowing her, the wisdom or knowledge of Athena, and we really need to get to an intuitive plane with Hephaestus. And lastly is the Lernaean Hydra, which is another Hercules myth. And Hercules is basically said that he has to go kill the Lernaean Hydra. But he's not explained, other than he's told that if he chops off one of the heads of the Hydra, the two will grow back. He's not told how he's supposed to defeat the Hydra. So he does. He takes his sword and he chops off the head, and two come back, and two more come back, and two more come back. And he's like, well, this isn't working. And a lot of times that's how we go through life. We don't have much instruction, whether it's that we don't have a philosophy of life, we don't know our values, we don't have astrology, don't we have a spiritual path, and we kind of just stumble and we keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. Then eventually we're like, wow, well, I guess I shouldn't do that anymore. And so the Lernaean Hydra, the way that he defeated it was that he actually took his club and he set it on fire. And he severed the heads with fire. And fire is the only element that transmutes. That does not mean that you can't transmute if you have a non-fire matrix. I'm using symbolically the energy of fire is what transmutes, because it means raising consciousness. So it's only through raising consciousness, and this is specifically related to the 8th house. Whatever's in the 8th house that must die cannot die, must be transmuted. So I had a client this morning, and we got to like her 7th gate, her 7th veil. Like we really got to like the core of her issue. And she texts me later and she's like, well, I saw a spider or a bug and I killed it. I guess I have to kill something in myself. I said, well, you actually have to transmute something in yourself, but that's okay. That's the step right before. So next week we'll work on transmuting it. But that was like sort of the precursor. And so oftentimes we try to suppress something. We say we're never going to do it again. We beat ourselves up. You know, we stick it in the bat bucket or the depths of the shadow. And really we have to take it out and bring light to it, which is the element of fire, and transmute it, raise the consciousness. And this class is about, we cannot defeat and kill off what's in the 8th house if we don't transmute it. So here's a picture of the Hydra and Hercules in the swamp where the Hydra lives. And notice he has a club. When I was looking for pictures, they all had swords. And I did not want to put a picture of a sword because it's wrong. The sword is intended to chop off the heads. It's the club that he sets on fire that is the one that actually at the end he succeeds with. So we're going to transmute the 8th house by the decanat. Again, it's that one decanat. Your 8th house cusp is going to be on a decanat, and we're going to transmute it using that energy. Any questions before I start with the 12 signs of the ascendant?
Can you just give like an example of what would you say to someone? You need to transmute this in the 8th house. So I have Saturn there. And
what do you have on the cusp?
Virgo.
Okay. So you're an Aquarius ascendant.
No, it's Libra, right?
No,
Virgo.
You're an Earth. Yeah, you're an Earth. You're a Virgo. Remember, this is equal houses. So Maria's ascendant is Aquarius, meaning she comes from an Earth matrix. So every 4, 8, 12 has to be an Earth. So the 4 will be Taurus, the 8th will be Virgo, and Capricorn is your 12th house cusp. So there's a few things. Now, this is obviously like the beginning of then layering upon, but if we're only looking at the 8th house cusp, what's Virgo? Virgo is the purity. Virgo is the virgin. Virgo is the wound that we continuously go back and open the wound and we cry for our wound. We might be in a 0 to 100 of virgin or prostitute if we're doing a 0 to 100. What decanat are you in? Do you know?
No.
Okay, well, we can check. But then by decanat, I would look at the decanat and specifically the decanat planet, and then find the decanat planet in the chart too. I would take it that extra step. But just knowing that you have an earth matrix, all that structure that you're longing for needs to sort of disintegrate. But specifically what you quote unquote want to kill off or transmute in the 8th is Virgo. So you would go to the meaning of Virgo, which of course is the wound because it's ruled by Chiron, so the primordial wound, and of course anything to do with the purification. So the body, of course, as an instrument of illness, the psyche, holding yourself to a 0 to 100 of non-prostitute archetypes. That's the main thing that I would talk to about to the client to start. And then, of course, I would look at Chiron, I would look at Black Moon, and I would look at whatever the planet is on your decanat. And we can look at that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So mainly you're going to look at tonight the structure, the matrix, which is the earth structure that you need to break down, because an Aquarius ascendant wants no structure. It wants total and utter chaos, fly by the seat of your pants, and throw it to the wind, my friend. That's where we're getting you. So, but good question. And if anyone has specific questions about their particular sign when we get there, just let me know and I'll break it down. So what I'm going to do in the next section is go through all 12. And we're going to go through the ascendant. We're going to go through the matrix of the 4, 8, 12. We're going to look at the sign on the 7th, and we're going to look at the sign on the 10th that are going to support breaking that infrastructure. So we'll start with Aries. So Aries comes from a water matrix. People that have an Aries ascendant feels that life is just too fast. They're not prepared. They attract people that are like go-getters, trailblazers, military, athletes, angry people. They tend to have a lot of anger because they can't keep up with the structure because they come from water, and water is the child, water is staying in the womb, water is all emotional. They're not go-getters, they're not movers and shakers. So they need to learn to speed up, follow through on things rather than not plan and just daydream. Because if you're coming from a water matrix, remember, you're looking at Cancer, you're looking at Pisces, and you're looking at Scorpio. So Aries in the past, Mars was the sexual sign. So a lot of times these people will live out this ascendant falsely through a sexual activity because they have a Scorpio, they have a Scorpio 8th house, which is obviously a very sexual placement. And it's one way to sort of symbolically live out the Mars or the Aries archetype on the ascendant. But it's really about getting into action, getting a plan. And then you know that the 2nd house is Taurus. So of course the materialization is putting something into matter, something to the earth element. They've got to bring it down. So Taurus is how they materialize it. They have an exchange of values between Taurus and Scorpio. So they have to look at sort of what they value, what they create, what they put in the earthly realm versus what other people provide. A Scorpio 8th house cusp is difficult because they actually use sexual energy as an exchange to get money and things. So they don't produce, others produce for them, and they need to produce. This is one of those signs that they themselves, to raise consciousness, needs to produce. Their Capricorn is on the midheaven. That helps them live out the ascendant and exchange the comforts of the 4th house cusp, which would be in Cancer. And Libras complement them. So Libra is the type of home that they should create with a partner, but because they probably have so much anger from Aries, they probably are very belligerent and actually don't have a peaceful home, but rather a very violent home as a means of living out that Aries ascendant falsely. So their breakdown is they come from a Pisces structure from a past life. So this is total escapism. Their 4th house, so they might have a very beautiful home. They'll invite you over to eat meals. They'll treat you like you're, their child. It's absolute refuge. They never want to leave the home. They don't want to leave the womb. They don't even want to know what's happening outside of the world. They're very closed off psychologically and emotionally. Childhood is lazy or inertia, or maybe they were suckled, by their mother a lot, and they really don't know how to confront crisis at all. And then their Scorpio 8th house cusp, being that at the material level or at the mundane astrology level, this also rules sex and the way that we use our sex in the world. So I don't know if you guys know this, but the 7th house cusp is how we start a relationship, and the 8th house cusp is how we stay in a relationship. That's our psychology. So if this person's Libra, they might seem all beautiful and great and social butterfly, but then they don't let you go with that Scorpio in the 8th house cusp. Because again, they're looking for someone to meet their resource needs, their things, their materialization, which is the money in the 2nd house. They don't know how to produce and be out in the world themselves. Taurus. Taurus comes from a fire matrix. So again, one of those that think that they're all that, and now they're structured into this body. Life goes too slow for them. Actually, Taurus rules the thyroid and the skin. It's not uncommon to see a lot of thyroid issues. Thyroid is actually linked to time. Hyperthyroid, they think life is too slow, they want to speed it up. Hyperthyroid, they think it's too fast, they want to slow it down. And Hashimoto's is the mix and match of both. They have a big emphasis on material things. They're frustrated with time. They want it to go faster. They want it to be on their time. They don't want to abide by earthly time. They're forced to care for their health and their body. They might get a lot of GI issues, spend time in nature so that they feel that they're that fire again, that they're like that larger than life. So they like to be in nature. They're going to attract people that have real estate, talk about wealth, and it might bother them because they're like, don't want to admit that they too are materially minded, but they have to learn to be. This is a sign of making money, acquiring wealth, and acquiring real estate. So Gemini is on the 2nd house. So Gemini is sort of the astute sign in terms of versatility. So they can do a lot of different things to make the money. They don't have to be structured to just one thing. So that sort of feeds into that fire matrix. They've got Scorpio on the 7th house cusp. Again, it's always going to be the opposite sign. So they're going to see it as other, but these people are going to help. And they have Aquarius on the 10th house. So maybe their work life and such isn't so routine. It's maybe sporadic. But that's going to help them perhaps do like multiple jobs to make money at. They come from a fire matrix. So Aries is fighting. They're a warrior. They want to fight. And life is just too slow. There's no one to fight with. Unlike Aries that wants to be in refuge and wants to fight with everybody. They're really here to pave the way for others. In the 8th house, they have Sagittarius, which is just idealism. Perhaps idealism about resources. Maybe they're those people that are like, the universe will provide, well, yes and no. You've got to have action and move forward, but it's an escapism. So the 8th house is one of the escape houses, and they might have an escapism tendency. And then their 4th house cusp down here is Leo. And Leo, if you remember from the moon class, Leo are people that have been told these heroic stories that they're special. So they view their childhood home as special, different, unique, and they still think that. And so how is time and life and money going to limit them if they have this sort of grandiose, narcissistic sort of viewpoint about themselves? Gemini. Gemini comes from an earth matrix. These people need to learn that nothing is static. There is no sort of structure. They can't live isolated from the world, and that there's many, many options. This is the interesting thing with Gemini. Gemini in the sun, the moon, the ascendant, wherever you have it, is all about dissociation. It's all about being scattered. It's all about options. So these people come from an earth matrix where they want black and white, where they want stability, structure, and told what to do. And in this lifetime, they're supposed to break that down and be comfortable with options and indecision and gray areas. It's very, very difficult. They always deliver things in two. They might have difficulty with siblings or cousins. So physically, Gemini rules the anxiety, neurosis. It can also rule the extremities, hands and feet, and some of the nervous system. Uranus is more of that, but some of the nervous system. Bipolar, so you might see that with this type of person because they can't deal with uncertainty. They're afraid of gray areas. They have difficulty finding one path. They attract intellectuals, movers, shakers, younger, immature people. This is what they need to become, so that's what they attract, but of course they judge it. Friends become like family. They attract liars and scam artists. They need to have less rigidity, so they attract people like Gemini, like Mercury's Hermes, that's like the merchant, that's the liar, that's the sneaky, like cunning, manipulative, because that's what they have to become. And they need to lighten up. They take life way too seriously. So Gemini on the ascendant gives you Cancer as the way that you materialize. So you materialize from family, you materialize with perhaps memories, traditions. So having some traditions, but not being maybe so rigid with them. On the 7th house cusp, their descendant is Sagittarius, and their 10th house cusp is Pisces. And their earth matrix comes from Taurus. So this is what they kind of have to leave behind. And Taurus is very attached. Taurus is the hoarder sign. So these people want to hoard when really they should be able to pick up and have nothing but a backpack. But yet they want to pack up like the snail, their whole house on their back. So it's an interesting sort of dichotomy in their subconscious. Virgo is their 4th house cusp. So it's very organized, it's very clean, it's very structured, it's very OCD, nothing's out of place. And here, universe is saying, throw it all away, fly like the wind, just whatever comes, comes. And then their 8th house is Capricorn. Again, this is a house of resources, this is a house of money. Capricorn is a money sign. They like wealth and a lot of it. Again, Gemini is a merchant. This is not about not having money. It's just not being attached and willing to spend it and use it, and not necessarily having to be so dutiful and responsible and proud. Cancer. So the Cancer ascendant comes from an air matrix. They seek stability because they come from an air sign, so they have it in their matrix that things are unstable. They create strong family bonds, not necessarily with family, but friends, and family is a theme. These people oftentimes get into the family business. They're the child that takes on the family business or takes care of the grandmother, or the grandmother raised them. There's always a link to the family that way. They're not selfish when it comes to family. Children are important, even if they don't have their own. They're here to nourish, raise children, family, and animals. They may volunteer at homeless shelters and serve through food. I know many people that have this ascendant that are chefs or cook as their way of showing nurturance. They're constantly speaking about a home. However, many of them don't even have a home they can call their own. They've never been a homeowner. I have one client who all she talks about is having like one of those tiny homes, and she's never been a homeowner. She's never been able to be a homeowner. They'll sacrifice anything to buy a home. They have strong mother issues. They project their mother onto other women, unstable relationships because it comes from Gemini, and they need to close, finish, and end things. Remember, they're coming from an air matrix. And if Gemini is options and starting and never following through, then here they have to kind of solidify and finish what they start. And they tend to have strong female figures, grandmothers or aunts in their family. Their 2nd house is Leo. So Leo is them. This is directly related to that mass consciousness myth that I shared with you. If here you are being told that you have to honor the mass consciousness, the family, the way you materialize that is obviously loving yourself first, putting yourself first, doing something for self. It's once you own the home, once you cook the food, once you're nourished, then you can become that ascendant. It's not the other way around. Capricorn is the descendant sign and Aries is the midheaven. So one of the things that you can see, I don't know if you're catching a pattern between the Capricorn and the Aries, for instance, these are very strong signs. These people need very strong people to get them out of that sort of Cancerian mentality. So you're going to start seeing qualities between the 7 and the 10th. Remember, it's the cross that they're on that are going to help that ascendant sign move forward. Doesn't mean it's free of conflict, and oftentimes will be conflict, and it can be mother, father, or partner. So conflict is going to arise, and they're not going to identify that it's them that is creating that conflict. They come from Gemini, which is always seeking outside the home. Geminis are very close to their brothers and sisters and their cousins, but they're really not a family sign. They're always wanting to be on the street. They're always wanting to go. If you remember the myth of Mercury or Hermes, he stole his brother Apollo's cows within minutes of being born. I love my brother, but I have to take something from him, I take him. Whoever I have to throw under the bus, I throw under the bus. So yeah, I love my brother, but I love myself more. So it's a very different structure to the Cancerian family mentality, what they come from. They have Libra in the 4th house, so of course a beautiful home, nice scents, candles, sensual fabrics, beauty. They don't want to leave, so that goes sort of hand in hand. But they also might be very, very social and maybe not at the home a lot or entertaining the home, but they may not have a lot of time for their family or their children because they're too busy, you know, being PTA mothers and at the club. The 8th house is Aquarius, and this is freedom, sexual freedom first and foremost, but it's very difficult with an 8th house Aquarius to necessarily have a stable home because you're seeing freedom as the subconscious. Your Hydra is I need freedom, anything constricts me. And so the home will be constricting, the marriage will be constricting, the children will be constricting. Leo comes from a water matrix. So they need family. They have a very strong connection to family because they come from this water and the Cancer matrix. They need to learn to be very strong individuals independently. They have to come out of that shy Cancer shell. I have a client who's a Virgo Leo ascendant. So Virgo already in a shell, coming from a Cancer matrix, it is so hard for this person to make it. He works from home. He's really bright, but he just can't get out of his own way because he's so stuck in that bubble because he's really embarrassed or afraid to kind of break through and get this Leo identity. The father figure is important, even if he was absent. They identify with the masses. And ironically, this is the myth of the Nemean lion, where you have to defeat the personality, you have to confront yourself, and you have to come out on top. But it's very difficult for these people to break away from the group. The group also for Leos, if you remember the Leo moon, is a very small group, but it's a group that always puts them on a pedestal because they're special. They're a bit of a narcissist, but they hide it. And then with the Cancer matrix, it's within their family that they're willing to be the golden child, but not beyond, which is what they need to do. They attract egocentric people, distinguished people, people that love the spotlight, because that's what they're supposed to become. They need to find their own identity, not the group identity. This is one of the hardest ascendants to integrate because they come from the mass of Cancer. So if you think of Cancer as the beehive or the honeypot, and they have to get out of that and live their own life and be the sun, be the solar energy, it's just very, very conflictive to the psyche. They have to learn individuality, individuation, leave the family, leave the beehive so that they can take up their own space. They have difficulty with their identity when it's not in reference to others, so their spouses, their children, their friends. The way they solidify or materialize this is through Virgo. So now here you see that it's a structure, again, like Taurus or like Aries, they need to produce something. They have to bring something down to the earth element. But the trick with Leo is you come from a mass, so like this big energy, that's the family. You're supposed to kind of shrink, but yet take up your proper space. And then you're supposed to go even further and materialize into a Virgo archetype, which is even more limited. So it's psychologically very difficult to constantly shrink and take your own space and your own light in the appropriate space. The opposite sign is Aquarius, which is kind of, free and take, the world is my oyster. And here they are being forced to kind of limit themselves with a Virgo second house. Taurus is their midheaven and Aquarius is the descendant. They come again from a Cancer matrix, so they're always looking for the family to kind of tell them. Their home was Scorpio. So Scorpio is very possessive. So maybe their mother or father was very possessive towards them, towards the time with them. So they're here that they were attached to the family unit. They were, maybe in secret, whatever their lived experience was, it was all about the family and the home and possessive and maybe a helicopter parent. And now here they're supposed to shine their own light. They don't know how. And then Pisces again is escapism. So there's a lot of escapism in the water matrix, and it's very difficult to break out of that to become the fire that you're supposed to be. Virgo, they come from a fire matrix, the Leo mindset where everything is big mind, big ego, big ideas, I'm the greatest, and now they have to shrink to this little itty bitty living space. I have a client who has this, and she's got Jupiter in the 4th. So her psyche, her subconscious, her home, everything is big, big, big. She's obese. She's got a 6,000 square foot house and she's alone with a little dog. I mean, it's all about gluttony psychologically, subconsciously, because she's this fire energy that has to be bigger than life. And she cannot. She'll be vegan. She's a vegan. And that's the way she honors, tiptoes around the Virgo, but she cannot integrate the Virgo. She struggles a lot with this. They're risk takers. They do whatever they want. Sometimes they have childhood illness. The body accumulates fat so that they don't feel restricted. Very common. So Virgo, even though Virgo is a sign of purification and really it should be sort of like a tidy sign, really oftentimes with a Virgo ascendant, the person suffers from obesity because of that fire matrix. They need to take up extra space, and weight is how they can do that. They feel their destiny is always limiting. They're individualist. Life will teach them not to be so individual. They can still shine and be an individual. The 7th house is going to be Pisces, and Pisces is a sign of emergence and union with the universe. So we're all one. So these people want to be so individual, yet their shadow and their descendant and their parents' relationship indicated we're all one. How do you rectify that? They always feel limited, restricted, and bending to what others want. They must learn to live in small spaces and share in a group mentality. That girl that I was talking about, she came for a reading years ago, and my guide said, you're gonna move into a house where all your stuff is gonna fit on the size of the kitchen table, and that's exactly what happened. And she's in a beautiful like penthouse on the beach. I mean, it's a beautiful thing, but it's small, and she's always like, I'm small, I'm constricted, I'm limited. It's just psychologically, she can't not have a big space. And they have to pay attention to the details. Everything's already in order. So how do they sort of solidify or materialize this is through Libra. So social activities, where Libra is a sign of the other. It's not just me from this Leo matrix, but there's another person I have to consider. The 7th house cusp is Pisces. If we're all one, we're all equal, we're the same. And then Gemini is the 10th house cusp, the midheaven. They come from a Leo matrix. So again, egocentric, expansive, no restriction. Sagittarius is their 4th house cusp. They had a big house, a big home, maybe a big parent, maybe a glutton, maybe a lot of money, a lot of wealth. You know, it's Zeus. So they had sort of a Zeus-like infrastructure in their psyche. And then their 8th house cusp is Aries, you know, which is very me, because Aries is the head of the zodiac. And this is what they have to learn, that it's not just me. And they can't be impulsive, and they have to slow down. Libra. Libra comes from an earth matrix where they view all situations as social relations, public relations, social interactions, everything. They attract people linked to social organizations, politics, and leaders. They're always in relationship to others. Family matters are important, best friends are important. However, they're always in conflict. Their opposite sign is Aries. They're creating conflict everywhere they're going. They create conflict in an attempt to resolve the conflict and make peace and become the Libra ascendant. But they don't realize that they're the source of all the conflict that they create. Once they start realizing that they are creating that conflict so that they can resolve it, then they start integrating the ascendant and can raise the consciousness. They want to win because they do come from Virgo, and they need to learn how to create an alliance with others. They will win and get ahead, but only if they work with others. That's one of the big lessons of the Libra ascendant. The surroundings must be beautiful, refined environments, makeup, fashion, famous people, Instagram image. That's Aphrodite. She needs all that. These people are very beautiful. Now, Libra and Taurus are both ruled by Venus, but the ascendant is very different in terms of the physical body and the way they carry themselves. The Taurus ascendant is bulkier and heavier. They're not as refined and they're not as curvy, and they tend to have issues around wealth or desire to accumulate wealth, whereas Libras just want to attract or accumulate beauty or image based things. So there's a difference in those two Venuses. They're captivated by all things beautiful. They're seductresses, and therefore they fall into seduction traps. They're very easily sort of enamored and enchanted. Anything beauty, anything glittery attracts them. And they need to learn equality instead of feeling threatened by other people. Scorpio is the way that they materialize all this beauty and the way that they put something in practice. That's a really difficult conundrum because Scorpio is a sign of possession, but it's also the sign of transmutation. So if they actually learn to transmute, then they can actually follow through on the Scorpio 2nd house. But if they go with possession, and Libra already is possessive because it's Aphrodite, then all they do is become narcissist and possessive and jealous and envious, and they don't really put anything into play, and they produce conflict. The midheaven is Cancer, and their descendant is Aries. So again, they've got this shadow aspect of argument and conflict and being first, when really what they have to learn is that they are in union with others. Any questions so far? Oh, let me finish this and then we'll be at midpoint and then I'll take any questions. Libra ascendant comes from a Virgo matrix. This is perfection, material, OCD. The physical body is an obsession in Virgo, especially in terms of purification. Remember, it's that sort of nun or virgin complex, and here you've got Aphrodite or Libra, that's a seductress. So there's a conflict there in terms of what the body is used for. Their 4th house cusp is Capricorn, so there's a lot of limitations, cold. There's nothing beautiful about the Capricorn 4th house cusp. It's just very organized and authoritative. And then the 8th house has to do with resources, and it's ruled by Taurus. So yeah, they love to have money and maybe use sex for money, or they have people buy them things when they're the ones that are supposed to be doing the partnership. So before we go to Scorpio to Pisces, any questions about Aries to Libra? about the midheaven, about the descendant, about the IC, about the matrix? No? Okay. So next is Scorpio. Scorpio comes from an air matrix. The themes with Scorpio always are going to be death and life. Everything is a life or death, life or death situation. These people need pain in order to feel pleasure. They need intensity in order to feel alive. Okay? They have desires, control issues, manipulation, greed, envy. It's a very, very deep ascendant, but there's always going to be, I need to kill something, something has to die, I need to have a breakup. There's some death of some sort before they're able to move to the next level. They might be surrounded with people that kill themselves, or there's a lot of death. They might have very conflictive home life. Most people with a Scorpio ascendant, I've yet to meet one that doesn't, have had some sort of sexual advance that's unwanted, some perversion sexually in their sort of childhood that's drawn by this Scorpio ascendant. They're attracted to powerful magnetic people. They're always in contact with pain. So maybe they're the ER doctor, or maybe they're, you know, always cutting themselves physically. They cut themselves in their wrists. They're always discussing or thinking about the larger world, the larger wounds of the world. So you can see maybe a humanitarian, and it is the fixed cross. So it could be the humanitarian, but it's because they feel the wounds of others. When they feel offended, they seek revenge. Their parents were always fighting. They're a product of a relationship, but the parents are fighting, so they hate themselves. So I have a client, I was with her the other day, and I asked her about her parents' relationship, and her mother's response was, oh, it wasn't that bad. And they're still married. And she's like, I don't want a relationship that's just not that bad. So she hates herself because she sees this conflict and is like, oh, well, then I guess I'm just not that bad. That's how she internalized it. But really, she has a lot of self-hatred. Very typical that they're involved in sexual triangles. They oftentimes, I had a client the other day who had this, and I asked him if he was bisexual because he had Gemini on the 8th. And he's like, no, actually, I don't have sex. He has restricted himself from sex because he's afraid of his perversive nature. He's afraid of what he can be in his sexual nature. So he castrated it. Their destiny will sting them in the face until they accept it or integrate it. And when they do feel pain, they actually feel as if they're raising their consciousness. So they seek painful situations. They see it as growth. They attract perverts and intense sex life and triangles. Sagittarius is how they materialize. So again, a very big irony when Sagittarius is escape or freedom or travel or beyond boundaries. And here they are so restricted to this sort of depth of darkness and wound that they suffer from. Leo is their midheaven and Taurus is their descendant. So their 12th house cusp is Libra. It's like a fantasy, a paradise, a Hallmark movie that never existed. And then they come into this cold, dark, bitter world. And they keep seeking something beautiful and rosy that doesn't exist. And all they confront themselves is with pain and with pain and with pain. And it's what they're creating in order to integrate the Scorpio ascendant. They don't want to integrate ugliness, the ugliness of the human nature, ugliness of sexuality, ugliness of relationships. And so they try to create beautiful situations that are false. Their 8th house cusp is Gemini. Gemini is all about dissociation, about triangles, about options, but they want to kind of rationalize things and stay in the rational mind. And Aquarius is their 4th house cusp. They had a cold, rational, maybe a lot of brilliant and intellectual conversations, but they never had that Scorpio sort of intensity and energy that they wanted. Sagittarius. So Sagittarius comes from a water matrix, born with limited views. And I have this, so I know this well, but we need to see beyond the family, beyond the emotion. So we often travel or study to try to get beyond that water matrix. Early on, they lost a loved one, observed intense conflicts in their environment, and was surrounded by mental illness or drug abuse. They'll love or hate people that are world travelers, expansive, or escape artists. Sagittarius is the escape artist sign along with Pisces. And in the old rulership, Sagittarius or Jupiter ruled both Pisces and Sagittarius. And I happen to be Pisces Sagittarius, so, and a Cancer moon. So escape artistry is my fame. Lectures, classes, trips abroad, expanding horizons, anything that gets you out of the water matrix of family. You just have an emotional infrastructure and you don't want to leave that it's anything that will make you leave that comfort of quote unquote home. Destiny will make you live abroad, surrounded by intelligent people, move out of their city, long distance trips. They need books, they need travel, they need other people, other experiences that aren't from the home, that aren't from the water matrix, but there's always a longing for home. Pain comes easily because it's a Scorpio 12th house, so it's a past life of Scorpio. They attract idealists and optimists and know-it-alls, and they need to experience someone who's a fall from grace because it's Jupiter, though they have to literally dethrone someone. The second house is Capricorn. So again, you come from this expansive fire mentality, but you have to bring something into space. So the escape artist is forced to sort of put something down, build something, and materialize something. Virgo is the midheaven, and Gemini is the descendant. It comes from a water matrix, Scorpio. So it's very easy to be easily in depression or fear or grief or sadness or pain. And here you have Sagittarius that's about happy and optimism and broadening horizons. You have to try to get out of the negativity and the wounds of the world. The fourth house is, it could be an escape home. It could be a home where there was addictions. It was a refuge. It was sort of like their little shell. And there was always a feeling of spirituality, or something was bigger than me, a world savior. Someone would help me and save you and get you out of your bad mood or out of your situation. And the eighth house is Cancer. So here you see a very intricate complexity, because Cancer is an emotional sign in a sexual house. And Sagittarius is Zeus, who's the whore of the zodiac. So they're supposed to be light and bright and free, but they're so emotionally attached, they can't just be sort of light and bright. It's a very heavy matrix for such a light sign. Capricorn comes from a fire matrix. They have a desire to do something, but every time they want to do it, they feel castrated. They feel that their desires are castrated because it's Sagittarius, and now they're forced to have an authority or a boundary or limitation from Capricorn. They feel that if they're climbing a mountain, it's with heavy weights. They're always having to carry heavy things wherever they go. Nothing flows, everything's restricted, everything is limited. Others depend on them. They feel judged and criticized easily, but really it's themselves. They're extremely, extremely hard critics, Capricorn ascendants. They always feel that just the universe is restricting them, everything, people, situations, even if they have a lot of wealth, even that restricts them, everything. There's a lot of death, not like a Scorpio pain and death, but a Capricorn death. They might have been raised by grandparents or older parents, and they've been exposed to death just by virtue of age. They can have like structural issues with their vertebrae, their neck, things like that, which is the structure of the body. They love solitude, and And they idealize actually being alone and in solitude because then they don't have to answer to anyone and do anything for anybody. There's definitely a father issue. The father might have died young or been gone a lot from the home or very authoritative. They're frustrated because the relationship with their father was cut short or their father died or disappeared, and their limited experience with the father is compensated because then they become the father in their relationship with their children, kind of like to continue that legacy. Aquarius is how they materialize. So again, you see this conundrum showing up. Aquarius is sort of global. So here you have someone that's very maybe financially minded, very selfish, very limited, cold, depressed to themselves, and yet they have to do something more global for others, maybe some sort of humanitarian effort or some social justice effort, or make something internet that isn't physical structure, and that really messes with them. They're Libra midheaven and they're Cancer descendant, which is the complete opposite. There's a big struggle, obviously, with perhaps an emotional partner and emotional friends when they really kind of lack a bit of that emotional notion with that Capricorn. They come from Sagittarius. So again, that fire matrix that's larger than life, and the earth and the body and the limits and the resources and the time always feel limited. They have a fourth house cusp. So they had a very either violent home or conflictive home or independent home. They called the shots. And then they have this Capricorn structure that limits them. They've got Leo on the eighth house. The thing is that the eighth house is other people. So how do I feel special in a house that's about other people? And then Sagittarius is that idea of abundance where they're faced with then a limitation or a scarcity mentality of Capricorn. Aquarius comes from an earth matrix. Their lesson is that they come from restriction and they need to expand. They want a lot of structure and they find themselves with none. They want things stipulated and measured. They want rules. They want budgets. They want structure. They want someone to tell them something, and nobody does. They have to kind of figure it out themselves. They really want rigidity and rules so they can feel safe, but instead they just find themselves with, no structure at all. They're oftentimes judged as crazy or as genius. They tend to be very brilliant. Many times they can't finish school. They're kicked out of school. They move schools. They have trouble with finishing school. And oftentimes, besides the fact that it's a structure, school is a structure that they're supposed to violate because they're not supposed to have any structures in their life, it's also because they're just brilliant and they're beyond what the expectations are, but then they're judged as crazy or misbehaved. They have instability in relationships. They don't really understand anything that happens to them. They live without a map. They just really have no guidance. They don't have any structure. They get attached, but they can't get attached because anything that they get attached to is taken from them. They are very attracted to different eccentric people, independent people, brilliant people, psychic people, people that just fly by the seat of their pants, that are quote unquote non-normal. Mental disorders, psychic illness, transgender, irresponsible, marginalized people, that's their cup of tea. They have to learn to live with no judgment and with no plan. And imagine coming from such a Capricorn structure, how difficult that is. One of my best friends has this, and yeah. Pisces. So the way you materialize, now you have a double doozy. You've got to materialize some ethereal, all is one, humanitarian, spiritual, escape artist thing when all you want is rigid, rigid, rigid. It's like, how do you do this? This is why it's the point of consciousness, because it's so hard. The Scorpio midheaven and the Leo descendant. And the Leo descendant is that person or people that think they're so special and they are brilliant and they're the ones that know. And it's really the Aquarius ascendant is, I'm like, I'm special and I know it, but I'm not supposed to identify with that because I come from Capricorn and that is not Capricornian. So they look at these other people that they attract in Leo and they're like, really, I'm brilliant, but they keep it to themselves and they have to kind of own that. They come from a Capricornian structure. They have to learn to live with no limits in Aquarius. They come with a Taurus fourth house cusp. Maybe they had a routine. Maybe there was a lot of emphasis on wealth. Maybe it was just a step by step. There was some level of structure. It could have just been a specific eating time. Every night at 6 o'clock, we ate dinner, and then at their house, they can't manage to get a decent eating time because there's no structure. And then the 8th house Virgo is, again, this is a sexual home, and yet it's the Virgin. So there's a struggle there with that nun prostitute archetype and purification of the body. And yes, you're supposed to purify your body with Virgo, but here you have to transmute the body as a source of illness, because that's what you're holding in your Earth archetype or your Earth matrix. And really Aquarius is just freedom from that. Your central nervous system can be shot though with an Aquarius ascendant. So that could be Parkinson's or any sort of central nervous system illness. And Pisces. Pisces comes from an air matrix. There's no form in Pisces. They want knowledge, they want concrete knowledge, but there's none. They're very attracted to spiritual, psychic issues. They attract people with mental illness, psychologists, people with no boundaries. Their parents probably didn't really have many boundaries, or were at the therapist all the time, or always seeking, tarot readers or something. They dilute reality. They're always creating confusing situations, mixed messages. They don't know that there's a boundary between them and the other. And this is the body. In addition to being the point of consciousness, it all represents the body too. So you can imagine the type of illnesses that they have. Obviously, they're going to be attracted to addictions and situations that aren't clear, but they're never going to understand that it's them. They might have an absent mother. Remember, Pisces archetype is that sort of universal mother. So maybe she wasn't there, but she was just energetically there. It's the most fearful ascendant because they have absolutely no connection to the earthly world. And the body, I said earlier, is the kind of microcosm of the macrocosm. And if they don't have a boundary or clarity between their body and another, or their body and the earth, then it's very scary to kind of go out into the earth without like a body. You're kind of like jellyfishy. They don't have a philosophy of life that they follow or that they're aware of. They do have one, but most people don't know it. They may not have strong rules. Nothing's clear. They stay very much in child and exaggerate their wounds. It's how they get kind of attention and connection to the universe. They need boundaries. That is absolutely necessary. So the way they materialize is with Aries. So complete opposite. Trailblazer, go-getter, leader, ego, directed will, and here they just want to stay merged with the universal consciousness. Sagittarius is their midheaven, and then Virgo. So this is the discernment that they lack. They attract people with discernment, but whether or not they use it is another story. And they come from an Aquarius matrix. So again, abstract, but very rational. Aquarius is cold. It tends to be a cold sign, but yet has no structure. They want structure. They come from Gemini. So again, options, maybe parents, were never home. They were merchants. They were traveling, maybe sex triangles. There was no clarity. Maybe there was a lot of talking, but never any follow through. And then their sex or their 8th house cusp is Libra, again, beauty and these abstract things of social activities and stuff, but really nothing concrete in terms of earth. They also suffer from a lot of doubt because of this 8th house, cusp. And they can't make any decisions because they're too busy pleasing others. Any questions?
I want to listen to mine again, and then I'll probably contact you later.
What's yours?
Cancer.
Cancer. Okay.
Yeah.
And you have a Pisces moon. So you're seeing that double doozy there.
Right.
Look at the decanat and look at where you have the moon in relationship, and we can look at it. We can look at it tomorrow if you want. But listen, pay attention, and then ask me whatever questions you have. And Siobhan, what's yours?
Mine is Aquarius, and I have Aquarius moon as well. And Pisces is my second house, my sun sign.
Yeah, Aquarius Pisces is a tough combo. I actually went to astrology school with a guy who was a Pisces Aquarius, and he was brilliant, but he really had just difficulty sort of, you know, with the concretization, so to speak. So if you want, take a look, and if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay. So we've got to integrate. I know that when I named my dog Dino, it was partly for many reasons, but one of the reasons I named him Dino was for Dionysus, which is a god of wine and pleasure, because I struggle with just light and bright fun. I've never just had a glass of wine or just unwound. Like, I don't know how to do that because I come from that dark depths of Scorpio, the wound, and let's talk dark and shadow. So you start seeing how you tiptoe. I became a university professor. I've traveled the world. I read a lot of books, but have I truly integrated it is that we could tiptoe. So I don't think that because you tiptoe and have created certain situations, because we create them so that we can realize we are them and become them. So that's important. I also identified one of the reasons why I attract a lot of addicts is because I won't even have a glass of wine. I won't even indulge in anything relaxing. So I attract these people that are so escape artists, that are so into pleasure as pain, when I'm pain as pleasure, so I can become that. So see how you kind of tiptoe around it, and what you need to do to integrate it fully.
Right. So wait, so which houses do you use to help understand what you're supposed to integrate?
Wait, let me stop and then I'll look at your chart. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me bring it up. Okay, you can see that?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got an, ooh. Okay, so you've got an ascendant Aquarius ascendant of a Uranus decanat. So you need to really deconstruct everything. And then you've got the moon in Aquarius as well. That's gonna be tough. With this sort of Capricornian structure. So it's not a coincidence that your mother tells you marry wealthy, Capricorn, you know, and you tiptoed by, you know, Mr. Sasquatch homeless guy over here. So yeah. That's how you tiptoed around it, but you still got a Capricornian partner at the root. So it's really about identifying those structures that you're attached to.
Okay.
So your value system is in the equal houses, it would be Pisces, it would be the second. So it's more spiritually minded. It's not that you obviously, the second house is values and money and all of those Western values that we have to honor. But really what your chart is taking you to is the merging with one. And what I would encourage you to do to remove the structures of the Capricornian matrix is in every single situation, where am I like this person? Where am I like this person? I like have that become an obsessive thought process, because the minute that you create a boundary with another, you fail to honor that Pisces second house cusp. So the way you quote unquote materialize all of that liberty and freedom, it could be through social justice, it could be through humanitarian, but really it's the identification, I am you, you are me, we are the same, we are equal, there is no boundary.
Okay.
So your mind creates a structure and a boundary that you're different. And Capricorn is an authoritarian. He ruled the world for 30 years. Like, Capricorns are very snobby. They only take the cherry at the top of the tree. Like, so you have to identify that whenever you judge someone, that keeps you separate from merging the universal consciousness of Pisces at your sun, but more importantly, your second house cusp. So I
Okay.
would have that become like just a constant thought. I'm judging, where do I have this? And then fine, you identify you have it, move on. But at least you stop to identify, I have that too. I had it, I'll have it, I have it now. Past, present, future. Can I ever do that? Someone killed someone. Can I do that? The answer is yes. Great, you just merged with the universe.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I just had an experience this week about that. I passed judgment on another female. And then I thought about it and I was like, you know why I passed judgment? Because we are similar in this area and I don't like that about myself. So it helped me to not see her on that like low vibrational level, but I raised my consciousness a little bit by identifying it. Okay.
Right. And that's awareness. That's the awareness step, that's the second step in the 7 gates. Where do I have this? So I have a constant thing, something silly. My kids were watching some stupid thing when I was preparing for class this morning. It was so loud and it was annoying. And I'm like, I'm loud and annoying. Like, immediately I was like, that's me. I'm loud and annoying. I don't like that about myself. Don't say a word. I went to walk the dog. When I got back, they were gone. Like it starts to dissolve because you start owning it.
Yeah.
And that really, to me, that is like the best thing. When we do the slumber party for the inner child, we're going to talk about that a lot. That ability to constantly just evaluate the thoughts. And that's the first step in the spiritual journey. And it's hard to have a black moon next to your sun and not judge women. Damn, you're freaking Lilith, bitch. Own that. But after you own it and you're great, then identify that she has it, you have it too.
Yeah, well, it's funny because my Chiron, you see there, is in the 5th house in Taurus. And, you know, we had a session where you talked about me helicopter parenting my son. I identified that in the other lady and I didn't like it. And I was like, ugh. And I was like,
interesting.
Oh, because we're the same.
Yeah, yeah. So that's how I would totally break down those structures of Capricorn with that second house. If the second house is how we have to materialize it, and you know that Pisces is ultimately union with everything and everyone, the best way to unify with the person is, I'm just like you. I'm just like you. It's like a constant thought process. And that really is, to me, what I see, that when people really become obsessive about their thoughts, they go to the next level. It's like a full-time job, but once it sort of becomes automatic, it really is life-changing.
Awesome. Yes. And my Capricornian mother, yes. I have so many stories of how many guys I've dated. And she's like, no, this one, that one, this one, that one. And I'll go and date them and then be like, oh, why does this not feel like I want to marry them? And then I won't marry them. And then she gets super mad. Won't talk to me.
Well, and you have a second house sun with black moon in there. You have a lot in your values house. So obviously it's not only values, but material.
Yeah.
You've got Jupiter in the 12th in Capricorn. I mean, you've got a lot of financial worth, you know what I'm saying? Money as worth to deconstruct in this lifetime. Have all the money in the world, just again, be in the world, not of the world. That's really a big part of your chart with all the Pisces and Capricorn and second house.
I try. I'm trying.
You're great. You guys are heaven sent. So Josh, if you want, you can ask now, or you can look, take your time and then ask me whenever.
Yeah, I had some questions, but then they went away. So I'll watch it again. I'll watch it again and get with you. It was very good though. Very good.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah, this is really cool because once you can identify, because the 4-8-12 is the subconscious. So immediately you know the subconscious structure of the person. And then you can start layering all the other stuff. So I find it very helpful, especially when I do subconscious work, just like the second house cusp with the values. Immediately I can see the values of the people. So it becomes like quickie little shortcuts to see what they've built their entire life on. Because I do a lot of different types of therapy. So looking at these little pinpoint things really like, ooh, and then I can pull that thread with them. So
right. Well, okay. So Josh has his ascendant is Cancer. So I heard in there that he will project his mother onto me.
Yes.
Yeah,
Both my ears are flapping. So
I think I transmuted that.
oh, you
It's
did? Okay,
okay.
that's good.
Well, and not only the Cancer ascendant, but that moon in Pisces, that universal mother, like that is like global. I mean, mom is everywhere. She may not ever be really present, but she's everywhere. So if you are the surrogate mother, because everyone's mother or father, then you take up this space in his sort of life that's just really big, you know.
Is that a good thing?
Yeah.
For you guys to decide.
No, I want you to
Yeah.
tell me now. Just kidding.
I do feel this tug, whatever I can identify with my mom. Like I can't really communicate with her, but I care for her. But we're very indifferent now. We've kind of went this way as I've gotten older, and she's very Capricornish, like she solitude, but at the same time contradicts herself a lot with little. I need people, but then she'll just clam up.
Mm.
Very interesting.
I mean, it's the psyche. It isn't really that I was writing something today about the Cancer moon. The Cancer moon repeatedly, everyone I know with the Cancer moon, which is what I have, has kind of a mother that doesn't attend to you. Why? Because they have to force you to go find a mother and get out in the world and grow up and mother yourself. So your mother, it's not that she's that Piscean universal moon. And it's very common that Pisces mothers actually aren't even really available and you could be like adopted or something. It's just a universal energy. It's like she's the mother of all mothers, but never really had her. So she could feel maybe ungraspable because it's that kind of moon. And I know several people like that. But you do tend to project a mother energy on to people. It makes you a great dad, but you've got to watch on, obviously the alcohol is that issue, the boundaries. So the boundaries have to be something that have to be constantly, repeatedly evaluated and looked at and really set those non-negotiables. That's what I have in The Truth is in the Triangle. Like the non-negotiables, these are the rules. This is what, that constant reassurance that you have boundaries, not the other person, but you, that makes you feel safe. So maybe your mom is Capricornian, but it's exactly what you need, which is that sort of distance.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good.
Yeah. So I love you guys.
Oh, that's awesome.
So give me a few minutes. I'll compress this and send it out. And then I'll send that consciousness sheet so that you have it individual. And I'll see you guys in the morning.
All right. See you in the
Yes.
morning.
Night.
Good night.